With the last ever episode of Stranger Things coming out in just a few hours, I wanted to quickly discuss the craziest theory currently going around on the internet. We've all noticed some inconsistencies throughout the story, some seemingly plot holes or little moments that just felt off. Well, what if they were all intentional and part of the big plot twist coming? What if we, as an audience, are actually getting vecna'd all along, things being intentionally changed or wiped from our memories, along with the characters in the show, as time and space is being ripped apart in Hawkins, and Vecna or the Mind Flayer is pulling the strings from behind the curtain? Now, you're probably thinking right now, and so did I when I first heard this sounds absolutely absurd. However, there is actually a fair amount of evidence for this theory. Number one, time inconsistencies. So, first up is the time inconsistencies throughout the show. This is probably the part of the theory you're all the most familiar with, especially if you've ever come across Birthdaygate before. But this is that Vecna, or the rift in space time and Hawkins created by the gates into the wormhole, has caused some sort of time inconsistencies. It's almost become a standing joke at this point that the writers don't know when Will's birthday is. Initially in season 1 at Will's funeral, his birthday was listed as August the 28th. However, in season 2, it's then retconned by Joyce to be March the 22nd, which was then later confirmed by the writers to be his canonical birthday. If it was just this, perhaps it could be brushed aside as season 1 not yet having the full context of the show established, as it was just meant to be a one off season. However, the mystery continues because in season 4, when Mike comes to California and they all go to Rincomania, did you actually know that this was supposed to be Will's birthday too? The camera recorder used by the bullies reads March 22nd, and there's even birthday imagery around Rincomania, as if we're supposed to have this in the back of our minds. Will's birthday has been forgotten by everyone, which seems a bit implausible to be true, especially from people like Joyce and Mike, who we wouldn't expect to forget something like this. So the theory is that there was some supernatural interference here. The plot thickens with a card in Will's room for the earlier season saying, "I forgot your birthday," and Joyce being confused about how old he is, 11 or 12, when he initially went missing. Even more so when the first shadow was released, and we now know that Will and Henry Creel share the same birthday, March 22nd. Some people have even linked these time inconsistencies to in season 5, where Karen argues with Ted, saying that he doesn't even know how old Holly is, and also perhaps this explaining an in universe reason for the sudden age up of Holly's character. There's also other cases of characters' memories being tampered with or changing, specifically in the memories used to get Will out of the Mind Flayer's control in season 2, which we then see play out in flashbacks in season 5. Will is said to have met Mike in kindergarten, however, they are much older than that in the flashbacks, and the casting call for young Will and Mike specifically said they were 8 years old. Also, in Jonathan's memory of Castle Byers, he makes a point of saying it was raining the whole time, so much so that they were sick for ages afterwards, where in Will's flashbacks it is sunny. Number 2. Visual and colour inconsistencies. This has been the most recent wave of speculation spreading across the internet. In season 5, there's been a few instances where colours of objects were changed. These being physical parts of the set, this feels odd that this would happen by accident, especially several times. After all, as Lucas said, we don't believe in coincidences. This started with people noticing that the dial in the radio station to turn the power off changes from grey to red. This theory is even more established when Holly specifically talks about the roundabout changing from yellow to blue, and that this was how she knew that this was the part of the memory being tampered with, and this is how you actually spot a memory that's been tampered with. Again, giving this theory explicit setup in the show. Another one which I actually haven't seen anyone else talk about, but I actually did notice during Volume 1 because I pointed it out in one of my videos. The signal tower changes colour from orange to green during the field scene between Mike and Will. From behind the scenes footage, we know that the base of the tower, which is a practical piece on set, is orange. So this colour switch in this one shot seems odd. It's perhaps also worth noting that blue and yellow combined make green, and those colours may or may not hold significance depending on how much byler content you have seen. Also, something changing from yellow to blue was what Holly pointed out about the roundabout. And was something else that perhaps changed from yellow to blue? Will's shirt in Rincomania. Behind the scenes footage from Rincomania has caused speculation from fans for a while now because in this behind the scenes he's wearing a different colour shirt here, leading fans to believe that this is perhaps part of some extra scene that didn't make it into the final cut. Perhaps part of a memory that Vecna has tampered with. After all, there's lots of stuff in the whole Rincomania scene about seeing things from different characters' perspectives, such as Will compared to Angela, and this showing us the different realities of what's going on here. Number 3. Vecna controlling Will. Next is the theory that Vecna is still controlling Will in some way. After all, he told Will that he needed him to be a spy again, and it would be odd if that was just to see Max was in the hospital because, logically, if she was in a coma, Where else would she be? This theory is that this was a misdirection and that Vecna is still controlling Will in some way. This theory started from people noticing several lines from Will's coming out speech seemed a bit odd and out of character. Most notably, him talking about biking to Malverd's for malted milkshakes. Malverd's, the store that Joyce used to work at in the show, would have been a convenience store for all of Will's life, like we see it in the show. However, in the 50s, where Henry lived in Hawkins, it was actually a diner. And in the first shadow, we even see him and Patty going there to get milkshakes together. Also, Patty and Henry, I think, are parallel to Mike and Will in several ways, but I don't know too much about that. Also, we have Will's line about him loving getting lost in the woods, which seems odd as Will most definitely doesn't like getting lost in the woods, as that's how all his trauma originating from Vecna and the Upside Down started with. And in season 1, there's even lots of reference to him just getting lost in the woods from people in Hawkins as an explanation to what's happened to him. Some people have even speculated Will is trying to tell them in some way that Vecna is controlling him or give a secret message by purposely saying something out of place, and maybe that Mike will notice this, as from season 2 we saw that Mike was always the first to notice when something was wrong with Will, and that he was the one able to get him temporarily out of the Mind Flayer's control here. Also, for me, this reminded me of a certain plot from a children's book called The Famous Five, where one of the characters, who goes by George, signs a note that she's being forced to send by the bad guys as Georgina, her full name. And this is what tips the others off that she's being forced to say these things, and that it's a trap. I doubt the Duffer Brothers are taking inspiration from this specific book, but it is a trope commonly used in stories. There is also the question of, if Will is temporarily able to possess Vecna and spy for him, surely now Vecna will be able to do the same thing to him. This actually parallels Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix very clearly here, a parallel that has been apparent throughout the whole season, but I've kind of been reluctant to bring up because, for obvious reasons, I don't really want to be discussing and giving credit to that author. However, this season does parallel the book a lot, where Harry and Voldemort are connected and Harry can see through Voldemort's eyes in his dreams, and then when he sees the snake attack on Arthur Weasley through the snake's eyes, as Voldemort was possessing the snake at that moment, this is described very similarly as when Will talks to Joyce about seeing through the Demogorgon's eyes during the attack on the military. The wording is actually almost identical if you go back and compare these two scenes. After this moment in the book, Voldemort realizes that he can then put visions back into Harry's mind in turn and make him do things because he can show him false visions, visions that his loved ones are in danger and that he's the only one that can go protect them, which eventually leads him into a trap. And obviously, the series then ends with Harry being kind of killed by Voldemort, then coming back to life, with a part of Voldemort inside him having been killed and their connection being severed. Something that many speculate could happen in some way between Will and Vecna. People have also noticed that Will's mannerisms have slightly changed, and specifically, people are picking up on the moment where he is standing in the same way that we often see Henry standing, and also Billy when he was being possessed by the Mind Flayer. Okay, so number 4, D&D. There's a few more little details here that people have picked up on. Firstly, people have speculated that there's a callback here to the end of season 1, where the boys are playing D&D campaign, and Mike says that the campaign's finished, even though the others don't feel like it's finished yet, despite having played for 10 hours. In this scene, it's a callback to the start of season 1, where in the game Will was taken by the Demogorgon at the end, and whereas now Mike is deciding to end the game by playing it safe. But this also tells the audience that the story wasn't over after season 1 and there was so much more to learn. Could this also be the message here that there's something big that we're still yet to uncover? Some also think that the 10-hour thing could be important, as Stranger Things 5 has an approx runtime of 10 hours and 8 minutes to be exact, the same time as Mike's campaign. Again, something brought up in this season a lot is relating Mike's campaigns to what's happening in the story, and that this time, unlike what we saw him do in season 1, he can't choose the ending. Number 5. A person you love, not music. It's been established this season by Max that it's not just music that can save you from Vecna's curse, it can also be a person you love, and in fact this perhaps is stronger. She makes it clear to Lucas that it was their love for each other which anchored her to the physical world, and was what allowed her to finally escape. And also she makes it clear that it was physical touch that was vital too. When Lucas touched her hand in the hospital, she could feel it, and this was part of what allowed her to escape. Now, all the bylers out there will have noticed this big shift in Mike, who in Volume 1 and the start of Volume 2 didn't seem to have a problem making physical contact with Will again. He puts his hand on his arm to make sure he's okay in Episode 1, and in Episode 5 it even opens with Mike literally rushing over to Will in order to give him a big hug. However, since Vecna took control over Will again, Mike seems to be going back to physically recoiling whenever in close proximity to Will, and even seeming to having to try and restrain himself whenever in close proximity. Particularly this moment is what fans have picked up on. Now, This may be nothing. To be honest, I often do this sort of hand stim that Mike's doing here when I'm nervous. However, maybe it could be something, as it does seem that if this was not intentional, they would have gone back and refilmed this moment, given the long shoot time they had for this season. Maybe Vecna knows that this is what could break Will out of the trance, so he won't let Mike touch him. After all, there is precedent of Mike being the one to break Will out of Vecna's trance before this season, and it also has now been established that physical touch from someone you love can break you out of Vecna's curse. Number 6, the theme of a play. Now, lastly, I wanted to touch on the imagery throughout season 4 and 5 of being in a play and having someone pulling the strings. We have Henry in Elle's Memories in season 4 talking about humans all acting in one terrible play, and he talks about the concept of time being something that humans have just invented. Vecna is very associated with clocks, and now with the wormhole, we literally see the fabric of time and space being pulled apart. In the first shadow, we have the player Hawkins High play a key role in this, and is now been briefly introduced to us through Max's time in Henry's memories, and also from this latest trailer shots of Elle, Max, and Callie on the stage of Curtain's opening. I think this will be revisited further. Also, there is imagery of having someone pulling at the strings through the song choice of Master of Puppets at the end of season 4. So perhaps this is indicating to us that Vecna, or more likely the Mind Flayer if we're sticking to the lore established in the first shadow, has been secretly pulling at the strings the whole time, even perhaps controlling Henry to an extent. And if you think this sounds like too much of a reach, we've already seen this been successfully pulled off by a big series before, in Marvel's WandaVision, by the reveal that it was Agatha all along. So maybe we'll get something similar here, though presumably without the theme song. Okay, so that was a lot. It was much longer than I intended, and with this finale coming out in 12 hours at the time of recording this, I'm going to have to do some very speedy editing, and that's also why I talked very fast, so I'm sorry. I do hear some people saying in my comments I talk too fast. I just really want to get this out here at this point. I will try and slow down for the future. But hopefully you enjoyed. Now, do I actually believe this could happen? I don't know. It would make a lot of sense and would tie up a lot of loose ends and would make any mistakes they had made in continuity from earlier seasons now be an intentional part of the plot, and would make them look like very good writers. However, part of me fears that the plot holes, especially those in Volume 2, were just plot holes and that the writers maybe aren't clever enough to do something like this. But we will see. Judgment will be reserved until after tonight. So good luck, everyone, and see you on the other side.